not working properly. Hello. Well, things seem to be working. Okay, last lecture. Right. Let's share screen. Where's the share? There's the share screen. Oops. All right. Okay. There we go. Okay, hi everyone who's here. Just wait a little longer for more participants. Chat and the thing, and put this over here. How much time do we have? 3 more minutes, probably wait 3 or 4 more minutes, and we'll get started. It's not going to be a long one. Just finishing off those last 2 sections. If we do end up going the full length, it'll probably be because we get some extra discussion going, but we'll see how things go. So. Hmm. 2 minutes to go. Tula, what are you doing over there? Well, I have 7:35 on my phone, so I guess if anyone else shows up, they'll just miss the, oh, there's somebody. Yeah, I guess others, oh, wow, weird. Okay, right, we'll get started. As I was saying, probably won't be that long of a lecture. We're only covering those last two sections of the final chapter. And maybe we'll have occasion to have some fun, imaginative discussions along the way, as I mentioned last time. So we'll see. Now, just by way of recap, we're dealing with the epistemology constraint in this last chapter. So far, Diana and Tironi have argued that if we have justified emotions, well, excuse me, those are sufficient to justify evaluative judgments. But that leads them to a question, which is kind of where we left off at the end of the last lecture. And that question is, quote, if justified emotions are sufficient for justified evaluative judgments, do they constitute a privileged route for the making of these judgments and hence for our knowledge of value? That's the question we're going to be asking today. And of course, the authors think the answer is yes. And really what these last two sections are doing, or what they're directed toward, are just directing or addressing a couple of worries. Worries that are expressed nicely in this next quote. By the way, this lecture is a little quote heavy. I apologize for that. And here we go. What's the worry? Well, it's right here. The idea that justified emotions constitute a privileged epistemological route for making justified evaluative judgments, namely the second part of our epistemological constraint, is at first sight in serious tension with the idea, which lies at the center of our account, that emotions and evaluative judgments are justified by the same reasons. After all, if the content of one's awareness justifies an emotion, then it would have justified the corresponding evaluative judgment, even though one did not experience the emotion, right? And we sort of explored this a little bit last time, right? We pointed out that evaluative judgments can occur without emotions, right? We can make, say, I don't know, ethical, moral, ethical, aesthetic judgments in principle without experiencing an emotion, right? So evaluative judgments are in principle inferable by subjects on the basis of information that might figure in the content of your mental states or whatever, such that you could form an evaluative judgment on the basis of that information independent of an emotional experience, right? So are emotions really privileged ways of ways of coming to know about values, right? That's the worry. The worry is that they might not be if we don't need them to make value judgments, if they're not necessary, right? So there are two routes to a value judgment that we can take. We could have an emotional route, which is obviously what we probably many of us undergo all the time when making certain value judgments or evaluative judgments. But there's also, at least in principle, a way in which we can make these judgments without emotions too. So it's kind of like a dual process model. This is not in dispute, right? We know there are all kinds of dual process models in the cognitive sciences, not just this one that the authors are talking about here. But the worry is, right, if emotions and evaluative judgments are justified by the same reasons, right, then we can have the evaluative judgment without having an emotion. So are emotions really privileged ways of knowing when it comes to values? That's the worry. The authors want to say, yes, they are. And I think I agree with them, right? So the worry we're trying to tackle here is whether emotions are epistemically superfluous, as the authors put it. But they don't think we should read too much into this possibility, right? After all, they say on page 121 Our awareness of the properties that justify our evaluative judgments must often be explained by our emotional sensitivity, right? You can think back to the example of, what was his name? Jim? The episode of embarrassment that we talked about in our previous lecture, where Jim's embarrassment is justified, not necessarily because he can articulate the reasons, but because those figure into his justified emotion, which justifies his judgment. He felt embarrassment, which justifies his judgment that the situation is embarrassing, right? That's the kind of thing we're talking about here with emotional sensitivity. The authors continue, for an evaluative judgment to be justified, the subject must be sensitive to properties that functions as reasons in its favor. And it's difficult for us to become aware of these properties without emotional sensitivity. And this is kind of, I think, what I was gesturing at last time when I mentioned that this theory, I don't know, and I think I was probably mistaken about this, but this theory sounded a little bit too cognitively demanding. I said that last time. And now I realize, no, I think I'm wrong about that, because they're not actually arguing that, Jim's evaluative judgment is not justified just because he can't articulate the reasons for, his embarrassment once he steps out of the room. It's justified because he has good reasons for his embarrassment. His embarrassment is justified, so therefore his judgment that the situation is embarrassing is also justified. And that's not cognitively demanding, right? The emotional sensitivity is, something we've evolved. Our emotions are something we've evolved to make these sort of rapid, not judgments, but rapid. It's a rapid way of coming to know something. Chelsea, go ahead.
Would we be able to say that it's, as opposed to it being cognitively demanding, needing to articulate it, not that it needs to be articulated, but so long as it's like a rational thing, like as long as it's like not, I guess, objectively rational, as you
Well,
just
yeah,
said, we've come to evolve to understand that it is the case, but it doesn't necessarily have to be articulated.
exactly. And this would be rational. Like, Jim's not behaving irrationally because his episode of embarrassment is correct and justified, which makes it rational, right?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but this isn't like a deliberative sort of thing, right?
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
kind of what I was like, well, are they saying this is supposed to be like deliberative? Because that is cognitively demanding. But no, they're not
Mhm.
saying that. They're saying, look, because we have this emotional sensitivity, we can kind of get to those value judgments by way of our emotions, and we can be sure that our the value judgments that follow or that explain our emotions are justified if the emotion is also justified, right?
Is it to say that the value judgment is a mediator to the emotion from the stimulus, or that the
The
emotion
emotion is
is the mediator?
like a mediator to the value judgment, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think.
Cool.
So and this, you can see why this should be the case too, right? Like, they also say quite rightly here that, quote, given the complexity of the environment through which we navigate, the prospects for detecting properties that could justify evaluative judgments without the aid of such a sensitivity are not promising, right? That's why
Yeah, that
we
makes a lot of
have
sense.
them.
Yeah.
They make, and this is a big thing in, all theories of emotion, but it's something that Richard Lazarus would always emphasize quite heavily, right? Like, emotions evolved to draw to, so that we can know what's important and deal with it, right? Because if we had to just sit and think through everything, we could easily miss important things that would lead us to make this value judgment or that value judgment.
Hmm.
So emotions are kind of like a cognitive shortcut, right?
Mm.
And again, this is where I'm going to go on one of those tangents where it's like, okay, but what really is the difference between this and an embodied judgment theory. I don't know. Maybe
yeah. That's a fair.
So I need to reread this book, and I need to email the authors, and I don't know. That's a big picture. I have to get rid of myself. So this is where we get to the fun stuff. Why this is so important, right? Here we've got Commander Data from Star Trek, probably one of my favorite characters from sci-fi ever, and of course Spot. That's his cat, Spot. Spot is a good cat. Now the authors say something that made me think of Commander Data here. Say, imagine, for instance, the task faced by a subject deprived of any sense of the comical and required to latch on to what may be funny in any given conversation. Or consider the subtle cues, the way others look at us, which values are at stake in the circumstances, their respective importance, etc., to which our sense of shame so often responds. As we have seen just above when considering the case of Jim, remember the embarrassed fellow there, we often prove quite bad at articulating the reasons to which our emotions are responding when or just after we experience them, right? Imagine this, imagine the difficult, well, we don't have to imagine the difficulty, really. We can explore it with Commander Data here, who is an android and who does not experience emotion. Yet, I would think, could, by virtue of his, computational resources, latch on to what may be funny in any given conversation, or what might be seen as embarrassing. It's interesting. Like, could we do this? Could a human without emotions do this in the same way that some kind of hyper advanced artificial intelligence might be able to understand and make value judgments without experiencing emotions? I just want to kick the ball over to everyone else and see what they think about this. Go ahead, Chelsea.
So I think that to wager that it wouldn't be possible would be to reintroduce dualism, right? Wouldn't it?
Maybe, yeah.
I think that kind of gets a little, and I know that there's a lot of people who wouldn't like that, right? Because there's a lot of people who want to intuitively say, like, no, emotions, this is a very human, organic kind of thing. And it's like, well, science has gone really far, and there's a lot that we can do with the math and the science that we've done and how we put it into robots. And I think that it's totally possible to just break it down
for a machine.
Yeah,
but maybe not for us.
Why not, though?
Well, if you I would just say the way I think of it is that, I mean, this is again why emotions evolved in us, right? They're adaptive in that they make things salient to us, and oftentimes it's all got to do with value, right?
Right.
So humans have brains that have evolved to do this. If we had a human, I don't know that we would have the computate, like a human without emotions. I don't know if they would have the computational resources to do what perhaps Data can do when he plays his violin and understands that, he can say, oh, this is regarded as a beautiful piece of music, but he feels nothing when he's playing it. You see what I mean? So okay. I don't know.
I think I misunderstood you. Yeah.
I think Data for sure, because Data's got his positronic brain or whatever. Right. So many calculations per second. So
yeah.
And Robin says something in the chat here. Kind of makes me think of that robot that is programmed just to constantly clean up its oil spills that's spilling until it breaks down and it gets frustrated, and watching the video it makes me feel so sad for the robot, even though feeling sad for a robot is a weird thing. Like, the robot isn't feeling, well, no, I think that does make sense, Robin. And there's actually, I've written a paper on this kind of thing. You can go and read it if you want. There's other papers too on whether empathy for robots is really empathy, or sympathy? Is it really sympathy, right? Because there's the worry of anthropomorphism, right? If you feel bad for this robot that's looks like it's getting frustrated cleaning up these oil spills or whatever, well, I mean, that's you projecting, arguably. A really funny example of this you can find in the work of Christoph Bartnek, and he's rerun the Milgram obedience experiments using robots as the learners. So, I mean, how much do we know about the Milgram studies? Just before I, it sounds like people know, but yeah, we all know Stanley Miller's obedience experiments, right? Yeah. Okay. No. Oh, Isabella doesn't. Okay. So just very briefly, Milgram, I won't get into any of the motivations or anything, but he did this series of very famous experiments where he had the participant work as a sort of teacher, right? There's an experimental confederate in the other room that's supposed to be answering questions, and every time they get one wrong, they get a shock. Now they're not really getting shocked, they're a confederate, they're an actor in the experiment, but the participant believes he's giving them a shock every time they get a question wrong. And the longer you go, the higher the voltage goes, up to 450 volts, which is lethal for a human. And Milgram found that he could very easily prompt people to administer a lethal dose of electricity as they went through the series of questions, just because they were prompted to by an authority figure. Yeah, exactly. No, you'd never get this through ethics now, unless you used a robot as the learner, right? And that's what Christoph Bartnek did. And here the participants were told explicitly, it's a robot. It can't really feel anything. It's just going like, ow, my pain receptors or whatever. It doesn't feel anything.
Okay, but at what point do the pain receptors then constitute as actually feeling pain? Like, aren't we concerned?
Well, the robot doesn't have pain receptors. It's a Lego robot. It's a very safe claim. Like, it doesn't feel anything.
Okay.
It just acts as if it's in pain. And people still in his experiments report feeling bad for the robot, right? Yeah. Or another one, and I've got tons of these, but this is the last one. Another one is Peter Kahn Jr.'s experiments with RoboV, where RoboV is a cute mechanical robot that looks like Wall-E, and he's playing games. He's playing I Spy with the experimental participants. The participants think it's all about interacting with the robot, but what actually happens is somebody comes in, another experimental confederate, and says, RoboV, you have to go in the closet now. Like, I need the room. Experiment's over. You have to go in the closet. And RoboV is protesting, like, I don't want to go in the closet. It's dark. I'm scared. This isn't fair.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But RoboV doesn't feel anything.
No, but it's so sad.
It is. And maybe this will, I don't know if this makes you think of any less of me, but we did something very similar in my PhD work, which was inspired by this, where we had people interacting with a virtual agent playing a game of 20 questions.
Oh my God.
And the participants would go through a few rounds. We were like, oh, we're evaluating our AI. It wasn't an AI. It was a Wizard of Oz experiment where I had a guy or a girl in the other room iterating through a list of scripted responses depending on.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so then at the end, before they finish the final round of the game, an alarm would go off, indicating that the experiment was end. And I would be sitting there with the experimental participant telling the virtual agent, okay, I have to shut you down now. And we had the agent protest, similar to RoboV, like, I don't want to be alone. When you shut me down, I'm alone by myself. And yeah, we had a few people that were like, oh, like they felt bad.
Oh yeah.
even though in, even though in the debriefing we were like, okay, just so you know, this was a puppet. There's no way you didn't hurt anyone's feelings. It was just my lab person in the other room there, you know. But yeah, people anthropomorphize. Just to go back up here, Leslie said something. Yeah, people who have a hard time understanding emotions. This is really interesting because obviously, people on the spectrum still make value judgments, right? Obviously they do. I think that, I mean, here's the thing with people on the spectrum. People on the spectrum might have difficulty understanding the emotions of others. But I mean, they still have emotions themselves. And therefore, it's not like they're emotionless, right? So if they're making value judgments, yeah, emotions are still figuring into that for sure. And just talk to people on the spectrum. I mean, I know I'm a professor. I probably know lots of people on the spectrum. You know, it's a spectrum, you know, like geez, like, you know, yeah. So you know, you're making value judgments. People with autism also have very intense interests, you know. They value things, obviously, you know, whether it's like trains or dinosaurs or music, or like your quirky professors. They have their own obscure interests, like robots and cognition and philosophy and stuff, right? So, you know, yeah, totally no problem with value judgments there. It's more of a problem with, I guess, usually it's characterized, if you're on the spectrum, that you have a problem with empathy or mind perception. But even that is kind of oversimplifying things, I think. You know, some people on the spectrum do become very successful and articulate emotion detectors and mind readers, but they describe it as you know, kind of like you're learning a second language, right? Like it doesn't come naturally. And of course, I think there's probably a big difference between you know, those who are verbal versus nonverbal, right? If you're nonverbal, I think you're going to have a lot more trouble with that. If you're verbal, remember, because language is sort of like a cognitive technology, you know, you can pick this stuff up, you know. There are tricks, right? Like one trick is like eye contact. A lot of people on the spectrum have trouble with eye contact. So what do? They look at the nose or the forehead or the cheeks, you know. So yeah. So yeah, fun questions about robots and stuff here. So I think data can form value judgments without emotions, but I think the authors are right that it would be difficult for us to form, to really justify our value judgments if we didn't have the emotional route to doing so. Not impossible, but this is what emotions are for. I think data could do it just because he's got such computational power, but could today's robots do it? Probably not. And I'll talk about the reasons for that in a moment. So let's see, how are we doing for time? Oh, it's only 8 o'clock, man. So this last observation, the observation discussed in the previous quote, proves crucial for the issue at hand, for it suggests that the evaluative verdict the subject would reach independently of his emotion may fail to respond to the good reasons his emotions responds to. You know, emotions kind of point like a value compass, right? Good reasons to continue. Good reasons for evaluative judgments may be in principle accessible independently of emotions, yet their relevance for these judgments would be missed or distorted if one were to coldly ponder the situation. As a result, the justification of these judgments can only be due to the fact that they are based on emotions responding to good reasons. And this is why the authors, at least one reason why the authors do not think that emotions are epistemically superfluous. They are rather a privileged epistemic route to knowledge about values, right? Another reason, just to go back to a page 120, another reason why we shouldn't read too much into this idea is that, the idea that emotions are epistemically superfluous runs afoul of some plausible requirements on the understanding of evaluative judgments. Yes, what about psychopaths and sociopaths? Well, psychopaths and sociopaths seem to me to have maybe distorted values or unjustified values, right? Like, think about, what was the example? Like, desires can be justified or unjustified, right? If something ought to obtain, it's justified. If my desire to help somebody is motivated by, my feeling compassion, which is rooted in a character trait of kindness, then yeah, no problem, right? But psychopaths aren't like that, right? Psychopaths are, I'm not going to say they're all immoral, because they're not, right? That's the really creepy thing about psychopaths, is that they know, some of them actually know better, right? They're not stupid. But yeah, like, think about it. A psychopath, what would there be to motivate a psychopath to go out of the way to help somebody else? Not feeling compassion, I would think, right? Maybe they'd help somebody if they thought, oh, maybe, I'm going to call them the favor one day, right? I'm going to get something out of this. But that's not really a well-justified motivation to help somebody, right?
What if we were to look at something like fear? If somebody's more manipulative, and maybe it doesn't translate well here, but if they're like not as emotionally responsive, I guess, or their emotions aren't as strong, how would they be able to make these judgments so quickly in the face of something like a dog that's dangerous?
Well, they might not.
Okay.
Right? Psychopaths do have a diminished fear response.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's some interesting research you can check out on psychopaths playing the Iowa gambling task, which is like a simple card game that really, like, you can't win, but they don't recognize that because they don't have the right emotional response.
Wow,
Right?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah. So check that out. Iowa Gambler's Task and Psychopaths. And yeah, as Leslie says in the comments, yeah, like, going back to my example of a psychopath helping someone, yeah, that's not true compassion. But the important thing that I wanted to get across was also that, like, they're not feeling compassion. They're feeling like, what can I get out of this? Right? What can you do for me? That's what a psychopath or a narcissist would do, right? Yeah, like Robin says, they're very often, you're absolutely right. They're narcissistic. You could say they're egoists, right?
Right.
People have that misconception that psychopaths are all like Hannibal Lecter or something, and no, psychopaths are like your CEOs.
Right.
Your megalomaniacal CEO, your asshole lawyer or doctor, or these are more likely to be psychopaths. Yeah, most murderers are probably not psychopaths, just like Leslie says they are no murderers. Yeah, and most murderers probably are not psychopaths. Depends on, you know, I mean, some murderers, it's a crime of passion. You know, sometimes we just go crazy for a bit. You know, you might plead insanity if you were on trial. Like if you just, maybe you came home and your family member had been hurt and the perpetrator was still there, and you fly into a rage and do something, but then they die. You know, like it's like a crime of passion. You know, and not to mention that most people are murdered by somebody that they know.
That's comforting.
Yeah.
That's why I don't know a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's why I don't have friends.
Yeah. Horrible Bosses. I haven't seen Horrible Bosses. What's Horrible Bosses?
I think it's a sitcom. I just
It's this movie where like, so there's these three guys and they all have these horrible bosses, and one of the bosses is played by Kevin Spacey, and you could see that he's clearly 110% a psychopath. Pretty much all the bosses are psychopaths.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder if Kevin Spacey was how much of that was acting.
I was just about to like he didn't have to do anything for that one.
Yeah, no, he just had to show up. Yeah. Yeah, holy crap, Kevin Spacey, man. Yeah, that guy. I don't know what his deal is, but there's something. Yeah,
there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, like, well, Isabella says it all blew up when Anthony Rapp came out and said, like, yeah, like he totally forced himself on me when I was like 14. And Kevin Spacey decided that would be a good time to come out as a gay person. And I'm like, well, I mean, okay, good for you, but dude, like, that's fucked. I mean,
dude, pick your timing better.
Yeah, I mean,
not a good, yeah.
Oh, and it sucked. I mean, I wasn't like a Kevin Spacey fan, but I really liked that movie K-Pax.
I've never seen it.
I mean, I'm not going to say go and watch it.
Yeah.
But it was a good movie. Jeff Bridges. I mean, who doesn't love Jeff Bridges, right? He was the other guy.
I can't picture who Jeff Bridges is.
Oh man, he's been in so many things. The Big Lebowski.
I've not seen that. I'm gonna watch it so soon.
Oh, it's so good. What else has he been in? I mean, he's been in so many things, but he's the dude in The Big Lebowski. He's
the dude. Okay.
Iron Man. I haven't seen the first Iron Man movie.
Hey, okay, so we can all judge each other here.
Yeah, I got into I just kind of got in after the Marvel thing had already started. I haven't gone back and watched anything that I haven't seen. King Kong.
Usual Suspects with Kevin Spacey is one of my favorite movies, and it made me really sad when everything came out.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. But King Kong, yeah, way back in the one with Jessica Walter.
I've not seen that.
It's like the 70s King Kong. Yeah, 19. Yeah. Jeff Bridges was in that with Jessica Walter.
In the safety of this class, I'm going to share that I only very recently realized that Planet of the Apes is not just a different version of King Kong. That's what I thought it was.
Well, that's okay. This is a safe space.
Yeah. I was like, somebody I know was watching it, and I was like, why are you doing that? It sounds so stupid. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, is it just like mini King Kongs? And he was like, yeah.
I mean, fair enough, though.
I had no idea. Yeah, apparently it's a cool sci-fi thing. So
it's cool. Yeah, I like the newer ones with what's his face? The guy who plays the motion capture guy.
Oh, I don't know who you're talking about.
His name escapes me. He played Gollum in Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
Andy Serkis. Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Rawan, as soon as I said it, You got it. Yeah, he plays the chimpanzee guy there. Really, really good job. Really, really awesome actor. What time is it? We better get back to it. Oh, whatever. It's the last class. So yeah, this runs afoul of some plausible requirements for the understanding of evaluative judgments. Or does it? I don't know. We got to consider Data again. Here's Data being super rational. If you've seen TNG, you know that Data likes to go to the holodeck and participate in the Sherlock Holmes stories. Yeah, right. And yes, this is another fun thing that happens for Chelsea knows, because
I'm freaking out right now. I'm so excited. This is on your side.
Well, what happens is Data is, he's so smart. He's an android. He needs an opponent that can beat him. So the computer creates like a super duper version of Moriarty, who is Sherlock Holmes's arch nemesis, Dr. Moriarty. And he's so sophisticated that he becomes conscious. And it's actually 2 episodes. There's the initial one where they have to kind of placate him for a bit. And then there's one where he kind of tricks the Enterprise bridge crew. And it's so good. Like it's a really good couple of episodes. But here's Data, again, with no emotions. Would he be any better at us at understanding, or would he understand value judgments as we do? It seems to me that the character does, and I'll tell you why after I read this quote. Yes. So all this is compatible with the idea that an ideal observer, who is Data here, may be in a position to reach justified evaluative judgments by exclusively following the non-emotional route. Yet we may want to deny that this is the case by appealing to a second reason for which emotions may be deemed epistemologically fundamental. Being a competent user of evaluative concepts may, after all, require more than the mere ability to apply them in the correct circumstances. So this is interesting because Data seems to understand values. And maybe some of you might not be familiar with the character, but even though he lacks emotions, he seems to understand values. But there's a catch to this, right? There's a catch to this. There are clearly points at which we see Data understanding values later on in his character's story. That's after he gets his emotion chip, right? He gets this emotion chip that came from actually his brother, Lore, who I have to talk about too, I suppose. He gets this emotion chip. There's, I think, one part in one of the movies where he cries when he finds his cat, right? He's just tears of joy. He's so happy to see his cat. The Enterprise blows up and crashes on some planet, and Data sees his cat, and it's tears of joy. And I just really like that one. And then, of course, spoiler alert, just in case any of you were going to go and binge watch all of the Star Trek. Data sacrifices his life to save Captain Picard in the final movie, Star Trek Nemesis, where we have a very young Tom Hardy playing some clone of Picard or something. It's really good. If you want to see like early Tom Hardy, it's a good movie. And Data obviously understands value if he's willing to sacrifice himself to save someone else. And of course, a lot of this gets resolved. Oh my God, I'm such a nerd. A lot of this gets resolved in the first season of Star Trek Picard, which also awesome. But, Data understands values there because he has emotions. He does eventually get emotions. Oh, it's good. I mean, the thing about just about the movies, Nemesis was a good Star Trek movie, but it wasn't the goodbye Data deserved. Picard gives us that goodbye.
I haven't watched Picard yet, nor have I really I tried to start watching Discovery and then it pissed me off. So
I'm
not watching Discovery.
It's grown on me. There are things
yeah.
I find weird about it, right? Like
It's
it
so
starts,
emotional.
well, it starts in the 23rd century, right? So I'm like, okay, this is like pre-Kirk. And the technology, I'm just like, this is not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's so true.
No. But the characters, the adventures they go on, the long kind of like season-long arcs, I'm into that. And it's gotten better. Like it has gotten better.
I watched it when it first came out and it was really hard for me.
Oh, and the Klingons.
Oh man, when did it come out? Like it was a few years ago that I watched it and I watched like 2 or 3 episodes and I was like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I might go back to it, but
I get that. Picard is not like that.
Okay. Okay.
Picard,
I haven't heard great things about Picard either.
Well, there's a lot of, I mean, that's the other thing is like toxic fan bases. I mean,
yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. But I mean, just the point is like Data finally gets a proper goodbye, and oh man, it was so good. I loved it.
Good. Okay, well, I'll watch the movies and then get on to Picard.
That's the way to go for sure. But yeah, like, can Data without emotions apply evaluative concepts without his emotions? Conceivably, like pretend you haven't seen the show and you just know, oh, here's a super intelligent android with no emotions. Oh, yeah. No, I digress. Yeah, but Leslie, you're right. I get the same thing.
The fandom's not too bad. I think it's too bad.
It's not too bad. I mean, I go on Trek Twitter a lot, and the fandom is like so positive there, but you still get those trolls who are like, Picard, the feminism ruined Star Trek, and I'm like, what? That's the same crowd that's like, you know, the same crowd that's all mad about Gina Carano being fired from The Mandalorian and how Kathleen Kennedy's ruining Star Wars, and it's like a lot of homophobia and misogyny, and it's just like, oh, like you like Star Trek, you don't get it then. If you're a raging misogynist homophobe, you clearly don't understand Star Trek. Like,
what of the show are you enjoying? What's going on? You've missed a big part.
So I don't know. Those people have emotions and clearly fail to deploy evaluative knowledge correctly. So, you know, same thing. I think with Data, the root of a lot of Data's childlike kind of trying and getting it wrong in his early, you know, his early storylines are kind of like, he doesn't quite get it. He knows, like, he's got the facts down.
Yeah.
But he still doesn't quite get it.
Exactly. Like the jokes when he wants to learn how to tell jokes.
Yeah. Right? And he's got a cigar like Groucho Marx, and he's kind of going through the motions, but he's not funny, right? Or the best was when Starship Mine. Anybody know that episode? That's the one where it's basically Die Hard in space.
Okay, I don't know them by episode names. There would have to be more.
So they gotta park the Enterprise at this facility to get a baryon sweep, like decontaminate the ship. Okay. And they're all stuck down at the surface with this really like annoying commander who's telling all these lame jokes and just like
I don't remember that. I don't remember later in the season.
So so Picard goes back up to the ship to get his saddle just to get away, because he's like, oh, I can go ride a horse here. Let me get out of here. I'm gonna go get my saddle, and he finds out that there are these guys on the Enterprise trying to steal some stuff, and so he's trapped on the ship and he's about to die, you know, because there's this baryon sweep that's going to decontaminate everything.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But anyway, Data's down with everyone else with this annoying commander. And he's like, he thinks this guy is good at socializing and being conversational, so he just starts
Doing
imitating
all that?
him.
Oh no.
And it's really great, like, because this guy who doesn't realize he's being annoying is loving this conversation he's having with Data, and Data's like, look how good I like. Have you noticed the mean temperature on this continent is like, he's talking about the most ridiculous things, but they're having such a wonderful time with each other because they both are so socially awkward.
Yeah.
So that's what this made me think of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So where was I going after this? I think we're nearly, oh, I've got 3 more slides. Jeez. Well, let's just continue here before I digress too far. The authors continue, categorizing an object, for example, as funny or shameful is indeed hardly detachable from the understanding that its properties give one reasons to favor or reject it. And we might wonder what sort of understanding of there being reasons to favor or reject an object we would preserve were we deprived of the relevant emotions. Again, stories of Data being first activated. He's walking around without any clothes on because he doesn't feel embarrassment. And the other colonists on Omicron Theta, where he's from, are they're embarrassed for him, but he doesn't experience it. Another Data example. And to continue, if they are justified, then they allow us to experience the attitudes these objects or situations make appropriate. This is why, or so we have suggested, that emotions prove to be intimately interwoven with our evaluative concepts. It is by experiencing the former that we come to be aware of the canonical conditions of application pertaining to the latter, right? So even if you're, or not even if you're, this is how we get the cognitive sophistication to make evaluative judgments, I think, in the absence of emotions, is that our emotions are kind of how we, I suppose, how our brains are trained to reason about this sort of thing, right? And that's been the point of all of my Data examples, is that data knows that certain things are considered beautiful or admirable or right or wrong, but he doesn't quite get it, right? He doesn't quite get it. And when he does experience emotions, he has difficulty making sense of them. And that was the point of the clip I uploaded to Discord when Data's talking with Commander LaForge, with Geordi. And he's trying to understand his anger. He experienced an outburst of anger. And he's trying to understand it, but he can't, because the only way Geordi can explain emotions to him is by referencing other emotions. Geordi's kind of like so used to just not thinking about this stuff, but just feeling it. Data is not. It's kind of like these two approaches collide in that little clip that I made available. And it's a great episode because it's got Lore, Data's evil brother. Lore is evil. Oh, that's The Descent, parts 1 and 2. Oh, I forgot, I'm such a nerd. Yeah, that's The Descent. It's the season 6 finale, season 7 premiere. Yeah, getting paid to tell you to watch sci-fi. So Lore, has emotions, but Lore is a psychopath. He's dangerous. He will manipulate anybody to get what he wants, including his brother. And that's what you'll see if you go and watch this episode, right? Pretty cool stuff. So, yeah, I guess just to kind of lacking emotions, yeah, would Data really understand the evaluative judgments he makes? I mean, I think replacing Data, or replacing this imagined subject with Data, I say here, in this quote, for Data, judging that something is amusing, degrading, or offensive consists in realizing that the object's properties justify the amusement, shame, or anger of others. And Data doesn't really seem to be able to do that without emotions. Oh yeah, Brent Spiner's awesome in these various roles. So good. So what would the author say not about data, but about their imagined subject that lacks emotions? Her lack of emotional responses means that she cannot experience objects as giving her reasons to act in various and distinctive ways. Being deprived of the capacity to experience situations as offensive, shameful, or amusing for herself, the sense in which we may think of her as animated by concerns such as staying decent, acting honorably, or cultivating her sense of humor is elusive, to say the least. She does not have any personal concern for staying decent, behaving honorably, or cultivating her sense of humor. Although she might succeed in blending in, as it were, such concerns could only be those of the people on whose judgments she models her evaluative competence. If there is any point in her making evaluative judgments, it is simply not the same as ours. Go back to the chat here. What would happen if we didn't have emotions? And the way it described it was like a really flat landscape, like without emotions. Yeah, exactly. That might be the video. That might be the video by the author of the book, actually. But yeah, you're right. Like a flat landscape. That's a really good way to put it. And that's exactly what emotions are for, according to the author, or the authors, assigning values to things, right? Emotions are kind of like nature's axiological computer system, if you like. And like Chelsea says, like, yeah, with depression, when you're depressed, you lose interest in a lot of things. You know, you just kind of lose your passion for things you were interested in before. Like you don't care about anything, right? And of course, another thing that happens when you're depressed, it's not that you're sad all the time, but your affect is depressed overall, right? It's kind of flat. You don't feel things as strongly. And that's why that sucks. I noticed some interesting parallels here. Just try and end up on a fun thought experiment. Our subject without emotions, who has to make value judgments or data, is a bit like Mary the color scientist in Frank Jackson's thought experiment, Mary's Room. Who knows this one? This is a fun one. Oh, Robin knows. Leslie, maybe Chelsea. Well, I'll go ahead and explain it just in case. So Mary is a color scientist, but she spent her whole life in this black and white room. Everything in the room is black and white, even her. You know, it's one of those weird lights that makes you look all grayscale. She's a color scientist. She knows everything about color, the physical properties of color. She knows all about, you know, the neuroscience of color, the physics, what wavelengths equal what color, blah, 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 blah. She knows everything about color. One day she's let out of her room and she sees color for the first time. Has Mary learned something new? If she has, well, that means, according to the intent of Jackson, the author of the thought experiment, it means that physicalism cannot explain phenomenal consciousness, because she knows all of the physical facts about color, right? Yeah, she learns the qualia. She sees red and oh, that qualia there, that's red. Cool. I know something new. The counter argument is, well, she didn't learn a new fact. Now she knows how. She doesn't know that. She knows how, right? Initially the thought experiment was presented as an argument against physicalism. Frank Jackson later on actually changed his mind about this. He said, well, actually, no, I don't think Mary learns a new fact when she leaves the room, right? I don't think she learns a new fact. She gets knowledge how rather than knowing that, right? Because propositions, you know, a fact, I like to think of facts as true propositions, right? And propositions are statements about the world. If you know a true proposition, you have a fact, right? It's just the way I like to think of them. But that aside, Mary, the colorblind scientist, is kind of like, if you were to ask her questions about color, she's kind of like the emotionless person making value judgments. I don't know. I just thought that was a cool parallel that I wanted to bring to your attention. Yeah, like a robot. Exactly like a robot. Because a robot can look, and go, oh, that light is such and such a wavelength, so it's red. This is such and such a wavelength, so it's blue. But does it have qualia? Does it have phenomenal subjective experience, right? Emotions do. I don't know. I thought it was weird that the authors didn't include that, because they have so many examples of, like, imagine looking at a blue vase and making a judgment about its blueness. And it's like, well, you should have talked about this here, right? This would be a great opportunity to bring this in what is otherwise like a really short chapter. But I don't know. If this book weren't so old, well, it's not old, but if this were a little newer, I think I'd write a review about it, because I've had so many different thoughts as we've made our way through it. And the last slide here. Again, get back to our imaginary subject / data. Our subject, devoid of emotional experiences, will by hypothesis come up with evaluative judgments that reliably fit the evaluative facts. And this is enough to satisfy respectable models of what justification consists in. That being said, we should take the full measure of what this entails. It would amount to claiming that the sort of justification at play is completely divorced from the kind of understanding that is implied by our evaluative practices, one that is constitutively connected to our emotional engagement with the world. This, then, is a second reason for thinking that emotions constitute an epistemologically privileged route for our knowledge of value. So yeah, the authors think, following this discussion, that yeah, the epistemology constraints are satisfied here. So they've got a theory that satisfied all the constraints they laid out, explains the emotions. I still don't know how I feel, though. One day I think felt bodily attitudes, awesome. The next day I think embodied judgments, also cool. I don't know. I really don't know. Who's got a question? Robin's got a question. Or no, I'm at the top again. Robots. I'm still stuck on robots, but if we program a robot to think and feel the exact same way as a human brain, then what is the difference between robotic emotions and human emotions? Why is my chat doing that? Like a brain, is a brain much different than a programmed AI? Well, and this is the thing, right? Yeah, and Isabella, yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading your essay. Yeah, person who can't feel. There's lots happening. Yeah, the robot waking up. I put that in the Discord. By the way, that is real. It's not CGI. That is real.
What?
Yeah.
It's real?
That
Oh
is
my
real.
gosh.
Now, but here's the thing. This thing is just a puppet, right? It's not like a strong AI or anything. It's a platform.
The facial expressions.
Yeah, the facial expressions are awesome, and I would love to get my hands on one of these things, because what it is, it's called Amica. It is an experimental vehicle for studying human robot interaction, for like affective computing, android science, social robotics. It's an experimental vehicle. If I had one of these, for my PhD, I wouldn't have had to use virtual characters, and I had to hook people up in the Oculus Rift, and that's a whole thing because people get simulator sickness. But if I had this thing, it's just a puppet. I could be there just controlling it, and it does only what I want it to do, but it does it with realistic facial expressions, realistic enough that people will respond to it in certain ways. And it's easier to do this kind of research with a robot than with a human actor, right? So
do you know if they've done anything in the case that they've done research on people's responses, their effective responses to it, have they tried to control for people's immediate emotional response, considering how we've had, like, I've seen so many people respond to how people responded here, saying that it's scary. Have they controlled for things like that?
In my PhD, I didn't control for it, but I explored whether there was a relationship between robot anxiety.
Okay. Okay.
Because
Cool.
that is a thing someone came up with. I
Yeah,
use
the
a
Terminator didn't really help us there.
no, but
No.
it's interesting because people in Eastern countries, Japan,
We're
Korea,
different, right?
yeah, they're not bothered by this. And I
No.
think partially that's because of the cultural practices like Shinto.
Mhm. Mhm.
Shinto is very animistic. There's spirits or kami everywhere. So if a tree or a shrine can have a spirit, why not a robot? There's no
Right.
problem.
Right.
I was just talking about this in my other class yesterday. Masahiro Mori, the Japanese roboticist who articulated the uncanny valley phenomenon, he has a book called The Buddha in the Robot, where he argues that one day robots will actually be able to achieve enlightenment. So,
Whoa.
yeah. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, we tried to control for robot anxiety, or not control, but we looked for relationships between robot anxiety and how they viewed the agent. We didn't really find anything, but there was an interesting kind of significant difference in how the robots were evaluated when it came to how good people were at cognitive empathy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if
What
I were
was
to,
the population?
just about 40 or 50 undergrads.
Were they in computer science?
No, most of them
Mm.
were in psych or cog sci.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I really want to get back into a lab and do some more of this, because like were I to do this again, I would use mind perception.
Okay.
Because we know that there's a mind perception effect on the uncanny valley too. So
Yeah.
we find interesting things when we look.
Mm.
Now what's I missed some things in the chat. Oh yeah, I wanted to answer Robin's question. See, that's the thing. And this is where we're getting to, like, kind of like what Chelsea said, like the dualism stuff. Like we're bumping up against the hard problem of consciousness here.
Right.
Like, can I program a robot to feel? Can I do that? Is that
Can
how
we
it
not?
works?
Can we not? Yeah.
Right? Is that what consciousness is?
Mm.
That's the thing. It's probably, I think I'm a materialist, I'm a naturalist. I think that consciousness is some kind of, maybe it's like an emergent property, or it supervenes on the physical states in the brain. There's a bunch of different ways it could work, but we haven't figured it out yet. It's kind of like Daniel Dennett says. Daniel Dennett has an essay called Why You Can't Make a Computer That Feels Pain. And what he basically argues is that we can't make a computer that feels pain because we don't yet have an adequate theory of pain.
Mm.
Once we do, we could implement it in a robot.
This is there's another Star Trek episode where they talk about necessity. What is it? Necessity breeds innovation, or something like that. I forget what the saying is.
Oh,
But
yeah.
where Geordi, because Geordi has that amazing technology that helps him see, they go to this other planet where everybody is basically made perfectly genetically engineered so that they don't have any needs, everything's fine. And then when they are confronted with a novel issue, they don't have the science that they need to be able to approach it.
The
And so
Masterpiece
Geordi,
Society.
exactly
Yes.
what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good example of at some point we'll probably get there because people don't like pain, right? Like we are trying to understand it, or people do really like to feel positive emotions. So there is enough that we're researching now. I mean, even in psychology, we've got positive psychology now, right?
Yeah.
People want to understand how it works, and I think there's good grounds to say that it's gonna happen.
One of these days. And then
Yeah.
the question becomes, is it something about our brains itself? Is it just a matter of the information processing, or is there something about what brains are made of? Depends who you ask. A functionalist would say, of course it doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't know. Would a robot that can feel pain, it might functionally be pain, but the qualia, would it be the same as human pain? I think that's the really interesting question, you know?
And how would we be able to verify that? That's right.
How indeed,
Yeah.
because it's all solipsism and stuff that you're getting into, right? So yeah, and Leslie asked at the bottom, is this all good? I mean, I think we probably want robots that empathize with us and understand us the way we understand ourselves, because if we have cold, unfeeling robots, that's where you get the Blade Runner, Terminator, Battlestar Galactica kind of stuff happening, right? The psychopathic robots, like Robin says in the chat. Someone else mentioned iRobot, right? The movie, Will Smith.
Yeah.
And there's the robot that kills somebody, and that's based on Isaac Asimov's short story. Isaac Asimov is the guy that introduced the idea of a positronic brain, which is what Data has in Star Trek. So wow, cool. Lots of cool sci-fi full circle moments there.
Isaac Asimov, his 4 laws. I remember learning about that in some class. It was against my will. I didn't like the class, but I learned about it. Have you seen, this is really cool if we want to talk about robots being psychopaths, Night Flyers?
I haven't. No, I'm not sure I'm even familiar with what it is.
Well, it's a TV show on Netflix that was canceled, and I'm really sad that it was canceled because it's a sci-fi show. It's terrifying, but so interesting. Like just the what it is that like we don't know what it is that is creating the robots to be doing what they're doing, and yeah, it's terrifying, but it's really cool. And I think if anyone wants any more psychopathic robots, they could totally check that show out.
I'll have to do that. I'm looking for something.
It's binge worthy.
Yeah.
I watched it very quick. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I do need more. I don't know. I'm working on a few other shows right now.
Yeah.
The Expanse is dropping its final season. There's no robots in the Expanse, but it's
never seen it.
Oh, you have to. It's so good.
Okay.
It's the most realistic sci-fi show I think that's ever been on television.
Okay.
No artificial gravity, no laser guns.
Oh wow.
It's very well done. Very well done. Really cool stuff.
Oh, it's on Prime.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime.
Nice.
And it's fantastic. But yeah, before I start, I'm watching Babylon 5 right now. And there's no robots in Babylon 5 either. There's lots of like space telepathy and weird stuff like that. Also such a good show. I need to finish that before I start any new sci-fi. So Leslie, which show, which one? The one that Chelsea was describing?
The one that you were just talking about?
Oh, The Expanse. I'll type it here. Very realistic. It takes place in the 23rd century, and like, you know, there's like Earth, and then Mars has been colonized, but it's like an independent state. And then there's like
predicting Elon.
What's that?
Predicting Elon Musk.
Oh yeah, I know. This is totally like, you want the Star Trek future, but the Expanse future is what we're gonna get.
It's what we're gonna get.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Like, yeah.
No.
So
That's awful.
And they have the belters, like they live and work in space in the asteroid belt, and they're like this kind of like lower class, like lower tier of society. And yeah, it's so crazy. My cousin is an extra on that show sometimes. She plays one of the belters. She's always there in the background. So that's kind of neat. Yeah.
Oh my God, Isabella.
Oh, for real.
What?
Well, that's no spoilers. Okay. That's, yeah. Isabella. Okay. So Isabella's seen the show. Am I correct in what? Yeah.
No, I was talking about the asteroid hitting the Earth.
Oh, what?
So like in the news, like the beginning of this month, they said that an asteroid is like coming in our Earth's direction and could like cross our what's it called? Like the thing around the Earth that protects us from that stuff. I don't know what it's called. I'm not a
The
scientist.
atmosphere?
Yeah. I was just like, can't wait, but not actually serious.
Yeah, Robin, this happens occasionally too, where small
Yeah, a rock
meteor,
in her bed.
yeah, will actually make it all the way to Earth and land on somebody or something. But no, I saw a headline recently. It's like asteroid to come within 1 billion kilometers of Earth, and and the picture is an asteroid smashing into the planet Earth, and I'm like, are you kidding me? 1 billion kilometers. Do you know, like, oh my God, like who wrote this article?
Oh my God, that's one of the worst things. Okay, even though I love university, that has been one of the worst things, has been realizing how nothing I read anymore.
Yeah.
Once I actually look at it, once I look, where's your source? Oh, your source is this thing that says there might be a small link between these two things.
Oh, sorry. I just looked it up and it's going to miss Earth, but it would have, if it hit Earth, it would have been catastrophic, it's saying.
Yeah, see, it's to get you got to get the clicks,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, like that's what this other article that they were like within 1 billion kilometers. I'm like, it's only like 150 mil. It's 150 million kilometers from the Earth to the sun.
And isn't it light years and stuff like that? Like light years.
Yeah, like 1 billion kilometers is like you're out with the gas giants.
Yeah.
Like this is not like, so what if this is technically true of most asteroids in the solar system? Like what is this garbage? Like so
that's awful.
We love fake news.
Yeah, fake news. Boo, fake news.
Oh my God. Well, it's the worst part is that it's true. It just doesn't matter, but it's trying to make people scared.
Oh, I know. And when it comes to like asteroids and stuff, like whatever. But this is what the COVID misinformation people, those peddlers, they do the same thing. They do the exact same thing. Yeah, or QAnon.
There's a movie coming out with Jennifer Lawrence, right? And I'm really excited to see it.
Oh, what's it about?
Basically an asteroid hitting Earth. There's a couple people.
Oh, really?
It's gonna hit the Earth, and they're really wrong, but they're so passionate about the fact that it's gonna happen. And
yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah, Meryl Streep's in it.
Yeah.
DiCaprio's in it. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
The way I told my girlfriend about it, and I was like, you need to watch the trailer for this. She's like, what's it about? And I'm like, it's like if there was an asteroid, but like everybody was like, oh no, that's not gonna hit, it's gonna be fine. Like it's like if like how COVID deniers reacted to COVID, but with an asteroid.
Oh, it's the other way around. So it is actually happening.
Yeah, it's coming, and everyone's like,
okay.
Let it hit Earth. It's got trillions of dollars of precious metals. Let it hit Earth. We'll be rich, And it's like, what? Like it's gonna kill you all. Like
what's going on?
Yeah. So good. So, oh yeah, yeah. Oh, you should watch the whole trailer, Leslie.
That's funny because I've seen the trailer and I didn't even get that from it. I was like, oh, they're probably crazy because of her haircut. That's why I thought this was crazy. That's funny.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's good. It's gonna be good. I'm looking forward to seeing it. But that's all I have for today, really. I mean, I know we spent a lot of time just chit-chatting about sci-fi and robots. Does anyone have any questions before we go?
I actually do, but if we're done now, I don't want to keep it. I can send you an email. It's fine.
No, if it's a short question, I mean.
Okay. It's just about the comprehension as an emotion, almost.
Comprehension.
The phenomenological experience of it and how that might be related to the self. So in the case that somebody has a really strong self-concept, they might experience more positive affect when they understand things. Even in the case that the object of their comprehension is not a positively valence thing. Like if they, they find out something that they don't like, but they still like learning, so they're happy that they have more understanding of it. I just thought about it today when I'm reading a paper on metacognition because
Yeah.
I have found a thing that I love to read about now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Honestly, I
Okay.
don't know.
I'm gonna look into it more because I know
Yeah.
that, like, obviously it's not an emotion, but there is a phenomenological experience of it. It seems to be.
Yeah. And it's a shame the authors of this book didn't really talk about. They kind of mentioned like, oh, cognitive phenomenology might be a thing, but anyway, they don't really talk about it. So
Yeah.
I
I'm
don't
gonna look
know.
into it specifically with what you've just said there. Cognitive phenomenology, is that what you said?
Yeah, cognitive phenomenology. Like, is there something that it's like to think this or to know that or
Okay.
right?
Cool.
So
That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I'd check that out for sure.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, you should all give yourselves a real big pat on the back for sticking with this class. I mean, the book was dense and the material was tricky, even tricked me up a couple of times. So way to go, everybody. And I'm sorry that I was late getting your feedback to you this semester.
Don't worry about it. You're great.
I know, but still, I let myself down there. And thank you all for bearing with me. I will have all of that shortly ready. So have a safe and happy holiday, everyone. Don't get sick. Be careful if you're out on the roads, if you're traveling. And I'm really looking forward to reading all your papers because, like, honestly, I'll say that again. I was blown away by most of the proposals. You guys are coming up with all kinds of really cool ideas, and I really can't wait to read them. So
Thank you so much. You're literally like definitely top tier professor I've ever had. Like 100%. I really enjoyed your lectures, even though sometimes I was like, "What's going on?" But like, you really took the time to explain it, and I really appreciate it. And yeah,
my pleasure. We're all here to learn, even me.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much. It was fantastic.
Welcome.
I learned so much. I like so much more than I thought I was going to learn.
Yeah.
I have no idea what to expect, and it's good.
And everybody also feel free to stick around the Discord. Feel free to stick around my YouTube channel. Once a student, always feel like you can come back and talk about philosophy or cognitive science. It's all good. So again, enjoy.
Happy holidays.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye, everyone. Take care. Stop share. Gotta turn off the thing and meeting.